I wanted to know, like, what are the stories that I need to know to help me understand your interest and passion for wildlife?
That's a great question and a great frame. Origin of it, I don't know. Like, I can't think of a story off the top of my head. I can think of falling out of it and falling back in. So falling out happened, I think, a little bit because I was finding it hard to figure out how to kind of balance between the like classic, like the megafauna, wildlife conservation type of world that I was very into growing up, and then the other uh, priorities that any country goes through. So I don't know if you followed, but the Forest Rights Act that it's 2006, 7. Like, I'm aging myself a lot, but at that point when that legislation was passing, there was a lot of conversation, and I think there was a brief time where it seemed like people who are interested in human rights, people who are interested in socio-economic development, and people who are interested in wildlife conservation were butting heads. And to me, that was something that was very. I felt like I was too young to figure out how you proceed with this kind of stuff. And as I moved on, like, my focus was like, oh, I want to go into journalism. I want to do like policy work. And the environment and wildlife was always there at the back of my mind, but I didn't think like this will be what I do 24/7. And after I graduated from college, I was so I was actually working in the US. This is also probably the point where I should say that I'm Indian American. So this does not come through often, but very back and forth life that I've lived. And in that first job, it was a policy job following politicians in the United States. And I was doing a piece on the Endangered Species Act, which is the US's equivalent of the Wildlife Protection Act in India. And there was like this moment where I was talking to a politician and they said, anyways, these protections are for a beetle. And in that, like, for a beetle thing, there was something just happened. There was like arg inside. And I said, do you understand this beetle? Like, what is the point of this beetle? What habitat does this beetle represent? Why is this beetle protected? Why do we even care about biodiversity? Why did you people pass this law that is about like scientifically protecting all species diversity if you were going to wake up one day and say, "Ke liye chalta hai, but keede ke liye nahi chalega." So when that hit me, I said, okay, no, I definitely want to slowly start veering back towards this, because that like genuine arc that I felt about that, like even in other spheres of policy, of journalism, I hadn't felt. And continuing in this kind of work, I think that theme remains. And a lot of the people, particularly, we're all doing this now on Instagram, are focusing on underrepresented species, ecosystems, thoughts in conservation. And I think that having the ability to push those things, that's the story that made a big change for me, where it was like, there's decreasing conflict between those interests that I thought when I was doing all the tiger stuff, volunteering as a kid was a problem. And instead, you're starting to see that there are obviously people who have an interest in making this whole project look futile, right? Like, oh, these people are just fighting for beetles. Very recently, it's happening with fish species, right? They just come into the media as, what are these people fighting for? Why do they care about this? And then when you get into the nitty-gritties of the situation, you realize, okay, no, this beetles conservation is actually aligning with the interest of the people that live there versus, oftentimes some outside interest or someone who has a desire to make the entire project look futile because they want to come in and change the entire landscape, right? They want to change the ownership structure of the land. They want to take land away from people. So it all lines up, and that beetle is just an easy way for them to say, like, destroy the earth. You know what I mean? So that story is the one that comes to mind, the beetle moment, just because as I'm talking to you, I'm feeling the same, like, and then you have to get into it. Okay, what does this actually look like in practice, right? Like, it sounds good on paper. Yeah, we should have goalposts set before we start trying to protect a species. Okay, what does that mean? Because as you know, in science, like, you realize a lot of things as you move forward. Species, habitats, and ranges change. Climate change has its effect, which is unrelated to whatever you've done within the Endangered Species Act. So there's constantly stuff to monitor and to understand deeper. So, I think that if you're interested in public policy, figuring out like what do I want to do? Do I want to be a policy maker? Like, do I want to be a politician? Do I want to work in like a think tank or something and be on that side? Do I want to be on the ground doing like work with practitioners or with communities and have a really strong understanding of policy, mostly so I can do legal work, right? So I can, battle policies or advocate for policies. And then finally, what I was gravitating towards, which is journalism, which is either in an organization doing the comms tasks or outside of an organization communicating all of this.
Wow. Okay, now I'm interested in how someone who's doing this suddenly goes to the Mumbai Intertidal zone and starts looking for Samundari creatures or ocean creatures. What is that story?
So while I was doing all this, after this, I worked in another place in the US, which was more of like a think tank. So it was just further down the policy route. And there you're actually even kind of doing research and like devising actual policies and like advocating for them with the government. While I was doing that, I said, like, I genuinely think I'm not as good at that as I am at talking to people. So I feel that there are people whose ability to like take a person who has power and like shake them in the right way is very, very high. I don't think I'm really good at dealing with one concentrated target so much as I am like, okay, dealing with like a broader base of people. I also feel that I am better with it because there's more like back and forth, right? Like you have more, I have so much incentive to like learn from people when I'm with them on shore, and it becomes mutual. Like even working with kids, I feel like you learn things all the time. Whereas when you're working with like people who are already in power, you have to kind of go in very set in what you're going to advocate for. Like there's not as much space to have like back and forth, because if you don't advocate for it, somebody else is going to come and advocate for the opposite with like the intensity that you didn't bring. So I think that, I mean, that remains true even with the public, but there's just a little more space for things like, I mean, I had this music thing. I wanted to like explore writing the way that so many of us, you included, have done, right? So that all, there seemed to be more space doing it, not facing politicians or policymakers. But more importantly, the main thing was like, I wanted to come back to India. And the work at WCS was international, but like anchored in the US. The work at the place at the think tank after that was very US centric, right? And as it should be, right? They're working on domestic policies and they have a lot to fight. Like the US has got a lot of, land issues. It has oceans issues, energy issues, and they need to focus on that. So I wanted to come back. I wanted to get involved with stuff in India, shouting back to like Kids for Tigers and Sanctuary Nature Foundation and all that. Like I knew that I know enough people who are doing this kind of work that like I can come back and try and do all of this. Personal reasons also motivating it. But the main thing is wanted to do the same kind of thing, but like people facing. And how does that reach the Samundari, how does that reach the Samudra Sundaris? Is we were doing Samudra work also at that job. I was on the lands team, so I was a little bit like, I want to do more ocean stuff, but like the team was the team. Same issues, right, that we deal with here in practice, we were dealing with at a policy level there, right? How should we manage a shoreline? Like what should development on a coast look like? How much access should people have to beaches and shorelines and places like that? Should there be offshore wind development? Should there not? Like what, all these things. I wanted to come back where I'm from and just experience that again with fresh eyes. So the choice of Samudra Sundaris is purely geographical. Like I'm really like into local conservation first. Like I do think that it's not even coming from like a place of like my conscience is saying that's better. It's just genuinely I get more excited by things locally. Like the same, I don't know, maybe you feel the same thing. If I see like a hornbill at home, like it's an Indian grey hornbill. It's not a hugely rare bird. It's really exciting to me, which like if I don't know, saw like went to the Andamans and saw Narcondam hornbill, maybe like it would be equivalent, right? Like it's that much more meaning when it's near us. And then it's also just becomes more powerful to tell people, like you talk to people about an octopus, like they're interested. You talk to people about an octopus that is 30 minutes from where they live, and that is in a place where when they went and walked on that beach, they said there's nothing there but, pollution and trash. It hits them so different, right? So I said, I'm not like the best photographer in the world. My photos are not going to be the artsiest, but I can photograph something that others were not focusing on so much. And those who were focusing on it, I really like those people, right? So speaking about Mumbai's shoreline, immediately I got to meet this amazing community of people under the project Marine Life of Mumbai, right? So there are people who work in organizations and schools and colleges, who are scientists, who are just regular people, and everybody is kind of united by an interest in these very obscure, very alien species on shore and in conserving them. And in a city where for a long time, nobody was really interested in the shore, right? So being in that community just strengthened it. And I said that, this is, as we discussed, like that, those underserved species, ecosystems, communities, people, priorities, all that. Again, not from a place of this is what we should do, just because I genuinely like doing that. And I think maybe similar for you and many others in this space, because somehow I think that all of us end up really focusing on what we can, right? Like if you go out wherever you are, your campus, your home, you're obviously going to find local stuff, right? Like we're not going to be able to go to the Andamans. So the local is just what means the most to us. And it's the
You know,
obvious thing.
I resonate so much with this idea of celebrating our local wildlife. I'll give you an example. Here at university, right now I'm at university and it's in the middle of Haryana, all right? Not the most exquisite, exotic landscape. It's like, I mean, you look outside, they're just fields, mustard fields, or there's barren fields. And then I just went out exploring once and I found a herd of nilgai. And mind you, I'm from Bangalore, right? So I had not seen nilgai before this. And I was like, what the hell? Like, I thought nilgai, I'd have to go to like Sariska or Ranthambore to see these creatures, but they're right here. Like, I mean, now after maybe 3 years, I know the specific spots in which I can find these herds across this landscape. And I took a photo on my phone. I didn't even have a good phone then. I had a decent phone in which I had to zoom in a lot, and like basically the picture was very blurry and bad. But when I showed that picture to my other university folks, they were also so blown away. I think that just really speaks to that. Since we're
You
talking
did a
about,
guide, right? Also to like,
yeah, I did, yeah, and then I mean in that spirit, I'd made the field guide for sure.
and I mean, I think that's the best thing we can have, right? Like just people to understand whatever the space is. Like there's that backyard biodiversity is the word for it. Like I keep using it. I'm like, chalo, backyards are not there, but like it's extended backyard, right? And the other thing, that stuff like, that porcupine quill reel. I think you've done one or two, but the
Yeah.
first time I said, this is just the type of thing that I really like, because people encounter stuff like that all the time and don't realize what's going on. Like on shore, when I actually showed like this cuttle bone on a reel, like some people started saying, "Arey, people used to tell us this is magarmach tears, like these are crocodile tears." And I was like, I mean, it's just, these are things that are so part of our lives, but we don't stop, take a moment and like really like take in what it means that like a porcupine is living there and like has this entire existence. And almost, I think so many campuses in India will have that, right? Nilgai, porcupine, like birds like that. So, I mean, it's the same thing that people can do everywhere. And then even though it's local to each one of us, like it connects everyone ultimately. Like it becomes a thing. Like if my local is Cheetal in SGNP and yours is Nilgai in, your campus, it's the same.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I mean, now when I look at Mumbai, I've been to Mumbai only once, all right, and that was recently. I'd come for this thing, but I mean, I want to come again, and I remember going on that. I mean, you'll have to tell me the name, but that big highway which is sort of over the ocean, Sea Link, I think that's what they call it.
Yeah.
And I remember looking at Haji Ali,
Yeah,
and then I saw your reel
yeah.
of something over there, I mean, I don't like, I'm sure people give you the same reaction when they encounter you and they say, listen, I didn't know that there were these creatures found on the Mumbai shores.
It happens every day. And like it's come to a point where like I even talk to people who've been doing this work for years, right? Long before I have, like seniors, like gurus in the space. And they're saying things like, at this point, everyone knows, right? And I'm like, no, it's crazy. Like they don't. And I just, when you mentioned the Haji Ali thing, I'll tell you something when it comes to Haryana, because you mentioned, right? So again, like the same way we can go to Mumbai shoreline or wherever, like you've done some work in Western Ghats, right? Like obviously a globally important landscape. It's the Haryana stuff that really gets interesting, because a lot of people just think those two states, Punjab, Haryana, and then the capital territory are very wildlife depleted. And they are, right? And they have really extreme, environmental problems there. But stuff perseveres, and like you can go there and you can connect with nature in these places, and they're open woodlands. And, we all want to focus on drier landscapes also. It's not just all about green and blue, yellow, brown matter also. And I mean, the same person showing both things has power as well. So the same thing I'm saying is like, I'm really keen to like push forth to people to say that this is the best project that like wildlife creators can do, which is where you are, what's there, and like get really deep into it.
Backyard biodiversity, that word, that really captures it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was, yeah. Oh yeah, why not? Yeah, no, how about that? I think even the Arctic tern, which had so okay for the listeners, an Arctic tern was sighted in Mumbai last year. Something that had been seen for a long time. It's a vagrant. It's not something that you see. It's a species that you don't normally see in India, and it's sort of different because of the winds. I think that was the theory. And I think that also just shows you that you might even think you know everything, but there are still so many creatures waiting to be discovered.
this is my favorite thing about Intertidal though, because sometimes like with birders, right? When that Arctic tunnel was happening, I was thinking about this because birders have gotten so good at ID that you can go, is this morph of reef heron, or is this morph of little egret, or intermediate, and now there's no intermediate, and it's really complex, right? There's times in Intertidal you have to leave it at phylum, which for non-nerds is down from animal, the next biggest level. Like in phylum, us, birds, frogs, fish, like we're all in one phylum. There's times when you're leaving it at phylum and you're just thinking to yourself, we really don't know anything. And there's sea slug species, which is, I mean, we love sea slugs, right? Like intertidal people. Some people joke saying that, what people who go on safari feel about tigers, intertidal people feel about nudibranchs. And I think for a lot of scuba divers, it's the same. There are species that are undescribed that are in Mumbai, right? So, I mean, you figure out the genus because we have experts who are really dedicated and they go through like books and they have like the plates in the field guide. They just have the genus name 1, genus 2, genus 3, genus 4, because they're all undescribed species. And there's been 2 or 3 of them that have been now described from India. So they have names like Pawar's and Shinde's Cratina because people have gotten around to describing these species from here. So yeah, I mean, you keep learning new things, you keep finding stuff that you didn't expect to find, and then sometimes you find stuff that no one has officially found.
Yeah, that's what also in some ways puzzles me. Like how is there so much life on the shores of Mumbai, a city that's arguably the most developed in the whole country? Like, what do you think makes that habitat so resilient but also like special?
I mean, I do think there's one factor, which is just how many people are actually recording biodiversity in Mumbai, right, compared to other places. So there's just been this in India intertidal bioblitz, and I was really sad hit with extreme sea FOMO. It's a sea foam pun, if anyone. FOMO at being out
Oh,
of.
I get it. I now get it. Okay, haha. Okay, continue.
I can't help myself. But there's this amazing BioBlitz, right? BioBlitz basically means it's like kind of like a healthy, fun competition where different people around the country were looking for intertidal wildlife, right? So people in Andamans, in Goa, but then 2 cities that really participated in a big way, Mumbai and Visakhapatnam. And as I was looking at the stuff coming out of there, I said, this is like, wow. I mean, because different water body, different coast, like completely different ecosystems, different species profile. I have gone to the Intertidal in Goa, and there are many species that we recognize from Mumbai. This was so awesome to me. So I think one is just the fact that many people are recording in Mumbai. The other thing is that I think it's really small amount of shoreline can still sustain quite a diversity of life. And the amazing thing about the sea is like it is the sea, right? It just connects everything. So if you allow a place, I think, to exist, the ocean can repopulate it very quickly and very easily. So when you talk about like destruction of shoreline, the issue is when it's completely eradicated as a space. So if there's like a pollution issue, untreated sewage, these are real issues, right? Overfishing, plastic, all these, you can start to repair, right? And then if you repair, like it can bounce back. But I think the thing with like landfilling and concretization is that shore is just gone. So then there's no space for that to ever be kind of reclaimed by the ocean and its biodiversity. So I think that one thing is in Mumbai, like a lot of the shores are quite small. So these are tracts of, like you said, you saw Haji Ali from the ceiling. I mean, now, I don't know how many years ago it was for you. Please, by the way, you have to come back, and there's a
Yeah,
whole
yeah.
lot of people who will love to take you to forests, mangroves, seashore, every kind of ecosystem. And I don't know when it was, but there there's now landfilling, and also about half of Haji Ali's shore is not really a shore anymore. But the other half still, you can go there and see the same stuff. And I think that it's important to keep finding and showing that same stuff, and to say that this is still there. This that is still there is still going to put fish in the ocean. It's still going to create a barrier to, water coming in. And the part that we often forget is it still offers a place for like the kids for tigers of next generation to go without having to get taken on a camp to Tadoba and just really get obsessed with sea slugs and grow up and describe sea slug species and, conserve shores here and elsewhere. So I think that, yeah, it's just the fact that even a little bit conserved the smallest amounts of things like do a lot here, where like even small modifications, don't get into the engineering because that's not my area of expertise, but like even small engineering decisions that could be made to mitigate for some of the damage and keep that biodiversity there can give you huge biodiversity dividends because of the blessing that is the ocean, right? And its ability to bring stuff. So yeah, that's I don't know if there's any I don't know if there's enough data to conclusively say that Mumbai's shoreline is richer than other shorelines, but that data will come slowly. And I think that as more parts of India are waking up to like the intertidal and getting the ability to go out there and record stuff, be it citizen science, be it traditional science, we'll get a better idea of this.
I think what you said is so important. I think the sort of incalculable power of being inspired at an early age. I think that's what Kids for Tigers really got. And maybe now we should have Kids for Mumbai's Intertidal Zone. Okay, I think we need to work on the name. But
Kids for tights, kids for tights.
yeah, I mean, you are good at this since you're a rapper, which is something I am going to get to. But I really appreciate what you said. Now, for the odd listener who hasn't visited Mumbai or hasn't seen your profile on Instagram yet, which you should check out, could you like give us a few of the cool animals that you've seen? I mean, I have a list here of some encounters that I want to specifically hear about, but this is your stage to pitch to them.
Uh, Bamboo shark, top one. I think people really get pretty mind blown to know that there are. I mean, that's the one you see on the shore, and then when you're looking at that, you can look out to the sea and think over there. There's hammerhead. There's tiger. There's whale shark, and whales. Moray eels, my personal favorite. I think the most fun to see on the intertidal, because with the sharks, at least these sharks, they're kind of once in a while. Sometimes it's a bycatch situation. Sometimes they're caught in a pool. Eels are there and they're living there and like they're doing their thing. So it's really great to see. Octopus, as we discussed, almost a staple. Like you will always see nudibranchs. Once you start to see them, addictive because each one looks completely different from the other. There are crazy amounts of colors and they have all the most, like I say, the slugs are thugs, right? They have the craziest life stories. All of them, basically all of their defenses are stolen from something else. There's some of them eat toxic sponges and turn the toxins into their own toxins. Others are doing the same thing with some other toxin species, so there's very cool life stories in there. What else? We have coral. So I think a lot of people get surprised to hear that there's corals on shore. The personal favorite anecdotal coral that I tell people about is one that apparently has a antiviral strain against dengue, which is huge. I mean, I've had dengue. I've had many people in my life have dengue. The thought of a coral potentially giving us a cure one day, huge. There is, I mean, any number of species of crustaceans, all kinds of. We have, as I described, undescribed sea slugs. So there's stuff that no one has seen. Another personal favorite of mine is this thing called the arrowworm, which is it's a part of plankton. Again, like a lot of people, I think of plankton as a single animal, like that SpongeBob cartoon plankton. It's not. It's a huge, mess of things moving around in the ocean. One of the things in it is like this little, I call it the hyena of plankton because it's got really crazy jaws and it's a predator and scavenger in plankton. That thing is now being found to consume microplastics. So that's
Oh,
another,
wow.
I think, crazy thing that you just, when you see this stuff and you're like, wow, what an amazing species. You go home, talk to someone who knows a lot about it, maybe read up about it, read a paper or two and realize, okay, there's a big story there. And then finally, I have to say that the two great blue species of the monsoon in Mumbai, which is the blue bottle and the blue button. Blue bottle is the Portuguese man o' war, which is, people call it a jellyfish. It's not a jellyfish, but it's a very cool looking kind of blue, purple, transparent, looks kind of like a balloon, but is also very toxic and deadly to touch. So it's not something to touch. And then blue button, which is like this little disc and it's blue in color and all the, tentacles kind of go around it. And these two, there is a third blue thing called the blue dragon, which I have not seen, and I don't know whether I've not really seen any records of it from Mumbai, but this blue trio is another one.
I think if that doesn't convince anyone to buy the next flight and go to Mumbai, I don't know what will. No, I mean, that point of like plankton. I think planktonic just means drifting, like it's just drifting organisms, right? Lovely. Yeah, I mean, I think when I saw your reel on the bamboo shark, or even just the moray eel. I lost my mind. I just, you would think, as at least as someone, who is enthusiastic about this space. I am. And I thought I knew like a fair bit amount of marine life knowledge, but your account just like slapped me in the face. And so that's why I wanted to understand what got you. Oh, wait, even before we get into your content creation journey, like take us into one of your walks. Like, what do you do? Say both of us land on the show, which is, by the way, an offer I will take you up on when I come to
Really
Mumbai.
happening. Yeah.
When we walk on the show with you, like how does that walk go?
Go to a place where you can access the shoreline. It can be a sandy beach, it can be a rocky patch, obviously wear the right footwear, all that. Most important is know the tide. So a lot of this is happening when it's really low tide. So there are very specific days in the year, usually around the new moon and the full moon, when the tides obviously are more extreme. So the low tide is way lower than the low tide on other days. That's what exposes a lot of these areas that otherwise are just underwater. And in these areas, I mean, some of them are beautiful to look at. Like there's so much like just sponge, right? Like colorful sea sponges. It's like rainbow plateaus that just show up out of nowhere, right? In Marathi, they call them tapu, which is like, it means like island, because it's just no one sees it coming and it's there. And you go out on the rocks or the sand, whatever it might be. And as you're going, the zonation also is really, something beautiful to see, right? The species change as you go. And what you're doing is, the best thing to do is to just find a pool and to just sit down and just like look for the really small stuff, because many of the coolest things now, thanks to phones and macro lenses and all this, I think people have seen some of the pictures of like what you're actually looking at. But there are really small animals that I'm not even, you said that you thought marine life, but like the page slaps you in the face. Every walk slaps me in the face. Every interaction with anyone in this space slaps me in the face, because there's like isopods and amphipods and these really small animals that I absolute beginner stage of understanding, right? And you see all their wild behaviors because they're all interacting with each other in these small ponds. So as you get through these small ponds and see them, and then slowly you figure out certain habitat preferences, right? Like, okay, there's this things called hydroids. They're actually animals, but similar to coral, they kind of give the vibe of a plant, because they look like grass, because they're little tiny colonial animals, and this small atoms that all live together and look like a grass structure. Then okay, this slug eats that. You realize, okay, moray eels are going to be in crevices. And then maybe if you're looking for something specific, you might go and look in the place to see, okay, like there's a bunch of rocks there, crevices, there may be moray eels. One cool one was, for a while, there was a moray eel which was in a crevice that around that had been lined by these porcelain crabs, which are actually like a lobster species. And apparently the protection ostensibly offered by the eel there from other species coming made a little enclave for them. So I would look for the crabs first, the red, to figure out where the moray eel was. So the same kind of things that you would do when you're like birding or you go on a safari, yaar, call sun rahe, ye sab kar rahe. You're doing the same thing on the shore as you get to know the different species and you get to know the different shores. So this is a rocky walk. On sandy, completely different story, right? And on sandy, often like there's a very senior marine person here who said like that's treasure hunting, because you're going somewhere, no idea what is this, like is this some part of a cuttlefish, this is some part of a shark, this is some part of some other animal that lives out in the deep, and you're just walking around and learning these things as you see them. So yeah,
This is a whole new world just hiding in plain sight. I think that's the beauty of it. Half of the beauty is in that. So, okay, now you're someone interested in this. How do you go from that to someone who is filming all this and sharing it on social media?
this is, by the way, something that I'd love to hear from you also, whether it's now or in another time. But as I said, I came back to India wanting to do this work here and direct people. And the obvious first thought was like organizations and like, how do I get involved at that level? There was this music thing, which I know I'm going to get to, which I was like, it can be incorporated, maybe, maybe not, I'll figure it out. But because of my previous jobs, I was active on Twitter, right? Not Instagram. And on Twitter, I said, I just need to start posting something. Actually, this credit has to go to my wife. And I mean, I love when people credit their people in their life who are not directly in the face of all this stuff, because she was the one who said like, this is going to, you can't sit out of the social media world and expect to move forward in all of this, right? Like you have to. And I said, okay, Twitter, I'm comfortable with it. Like, I know it already. And on Twitter, I just started posting like a species a day, right? So I take a photo and I just post it and put a little bit of like some buck about it. And it got a following, which surprised me. Tiny following, but like a tiny dedicated following, including one guy who I don't know, but he, one day when I didn't post it, he sent me a DM like, where is Aaj ka Prani? I was like, this Prani thing is real, right? And then as a joke, one day I was like, Pratidin Prani. And then they'd actually be like, Pratidin Prani. And then other people would say Pratidin Prani. And I said, okay, there's at least 30 humans on the planet right now who, whatever else is going on in their life, really value my Pratidin Prani. And I'm like, okay, I need to put more effort into finding them a Pratidin Prani, right? Because there's only so many times I can put Alexandrian parakeet and rosary parakeet, which is why then shore and bugs and all of this like became more. And then it's happening on Twitter and I abandoned it, which I feel bad about and I should not have done. But as I was doing it, I was also like freelancing, I was doing copywriting, I was doing other stuff, right? Just like other aspects of work while figuring this out in India. And my client for copy actually was the one who said to me, you know, this belongs on Instagram, right? This belongs on YouTube. You're doing something good. You could do it much better and much bigger in India by just switching an app. And I had so much lethargy to switch the app. But then again, the two of them, they kind of got that idea through to me saying, it's just about like step by step. First a post, then it'll be a reel, and then you'll get the hang of it. And again, my wife was like a big advocate of this, saying, I'm watching pointless reels. Sometimes an animal shows up. Sometimes it's an animal that's been tortured in some random circus and I don't know any better. I would love to have an algorithm that show me wildlife content instead, like yours, like mine today, all of that. So I said, okay, people even who aren't that into wildlife would want to see it while they're mindlessly scrolling. So I started putting on Instagram and then the Instagram stuff went well, right? And then through the organizations that I was already doing some work, like with Sanctuary, I was already doing this song. And I'd done this song at some schools and I'd done some MCing of events for them and all that. And then I said, okay, I can do content with them. And then, I'd written a copy previously for Coexist by Alia Bhatt, which I know you have collaborated with as well. So then they were like, we can do a collaboration. So I said, okay, I can collaborate with them. And then I discovered that there's so many people who are doing this, like you, like Kaden and Sandra, like all these people who are on Instagram putting these reels. So I said, there's an ecosystem, it's building and it'll continue to build. So that's how it started. And then at some point in June of last year, again, I said like, I'm going to bring the music into it, which is why I did this thing. I don't know if you've seen it called like Ocean Month. It was very early in my page, but I did like a rap every day about like a different intertidal species with like my clips of them. Very kacha pakka, rawly done, recorded on phone. One of them, I think in those days, I used to think I have to put some audio. So I used to put like seashore audio. That seashore audio was copyrighted. It got removed. So Instagram has removed all my audio. So my rap is gone. So I have to redo that. But yeah, kacha pakka as it was, like it caught on. A lot of people supported it. Comedians, stand-up comedians, actors, like, people who have any connect to the sea, right? Someone has gone once and scuba dived in Thailand or something. And they're like, Arey, Mumbai ke chhor pe ye sab. So exactly what you said. And then as it built, I said, okay, cool. This is paying off more to doing this kind of work than me like trying all the other ways that I've tried. So I have to keep this going. And we'll all discuss like what, the best use of the Instagram is, but I think it's just to like catch more eyeballs, right? So you get eyeballs everywhere. Somebody has events, they get, add this element to that. Somebody is doing some great practitioner work and they're saying, can we work together on something? Great. And then now the best was this, like in the UAE, right? So it became international because this teacher who is in the UAE, but also has a little organization called Nature Wave, connecting people to nature, said, do you do schools? And I've done a few schools. So I said, yeah. Then that came about. So that's when I just said, like, just have to keep putting the stuff on Instagram because it helps connect to people in the real world when you're there. It's just a magnifying medium. Yeah.
You really touched on something I wanted to ask you later, but I'll ask you now. The role of social media in the whole conservation story. I see some organizations doing it well. I see a lot of individuals doing it well, but I see a lot of organizations not doing it well. And so I was wondering, like, because a lot of these folks ask me sometimes, we want your tips or whatever, like, how do we up our game? And so what do you think organizations should be doing within the space? Because, we're all fighting for the same goal, right? Preserving our natural heritage. What are some things they should do to sort of get more eyeballs, as you said, get in front of more eyeballs.
I mean, the one obvious one might sound self-serving that we are saying this, but I really believe in it, is to work with individuals, right? Because I think that this is, again, the same thing that those clients from like writing copy said to me, where they said that social media, long-term social media, is about people, and it's about individual people. And people who are watching get invested in the stories of the individual people. And at that point, I didn't believe it, because I said, I consume wildlife content and I'm not interested in the individual people. Like, I'm interested in the wildlife, right? But then I thought about it and I said, बचपन में हम Steve Irwin देखते थे, and like even someone like Bittu Sehgal or Dr. Andheriya are individuals, right? And I think that individuals just provide an anchor for experiencing wildlife. In the end, I don't know, there are people who can truly have no human element to it, and they just, completely ecocentric. I don't think that's me. Like, I think that the value of a species actually increases in my head if I find someone who's really vested in it, right? Like when you hear a story about like a community, right, who really values their river, something in my head just that makes that river increase in value, right? Like, which would not necessarily be captured just by what the river is doing ecologically and economically in isolation from how that community perceives that river. So I said, we're just doing the same thing at like an individual level, right? And especially if I'm going very close to where I live on the shore in Mumbai and showing people that connect, they will always connect with bamboo shark. They will always connect with octopus. I'm really into this tunicate that I've found, right? And understood like, oh, what its history is with us, or these sea sponges, where I'm like, wow, the most distant creature from us has also kind of started to make its way onto the intertidal zone and how differently it did it. And sometimes people are just more into how you engage with that than they are into the thing at first. And then it changes over time. And I tell this to people also, it's like there was a time in the world where nobody, not even people living in, Mumbai, Bangalore, Delhi, West, whatever, who were not subjected to elephants, entering their fields every day, also didn't love elephants, right? They just looked at them and said like, no, that's a really horrible, beastly animal that my grandfather or my father, someone was being killed by that. And I would tomorrow if, it were to come here. That changed because there are people who individually engaged with that and like showed you the possibility of an individual to have some kind of different feeling towards elephant. And that's what I think that it's a challenge for organizations to do, because organizations are, again, like, the better the organization, the more machine-like it becomes, right? And the more it's going to work as, and they need that. For finances, they need that. For the practicing element, they need that. For policy element, they need that. So yeah, they can find individuals within their organizations or outside in communities, in social, etc. already, and figure out good ways to work with them. I think that's possibly a huge thing that they can do to get better with the social media. And the other thing is, they don't need to be the stars, quote unquote, right? Like, they can also be two things that are more important than being the star, which is to be the final product, right? Like, what are we connecting people to? Right now, I'm connecting people with nature. I'm also connecting people with the organizations that are there doing the work, right? So the organization, I think, can think of itself as, I need, like I would have done with any other form of publicity, I need to see myself as like, what is the work that I'm doing? And how do I get all these people who are doing social to help channel work that way? And the organizations that do a good job, I think, are really killing it at that. I do want to say, like, for example, this, do you know the Dhol project?
Such good work.
Dhol project, right? And I think I saw something happen. And like, I don't know whether this is anecdotal, but when I started this thing on Twitter, right? It's now 2 years ago. I had just come from this Tadoba experience, like hearing wild dog, jungli kutta, ye wo, kyu, like no one interested, tiger udhar hai, unko chodo. I'm like, what is this? These are the people who are paid money to come to see wildlife, and they are undermining a very interesting endangered species that foreigners are getting confused. Like, why do these people undermine it so much, right? I remember seeing these YouTube videos by like luxury South African tour operators who come to India, put up a video, and like I would comment, like I was very activisty about this whole thing, saying, what do you feel about how like those are perceived in the country? And like, oh, we don't get it. Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, because it's a weird thing. And then like in 2 years, like at least on social, it completely changed, right? And I think Dhol project played a big role in that, because they were putting front and center like this, connect people to this species. Species obviously being a conduit to ecosystem and everything else, the same way that the tiger was used in 1972. So I think that organizations also can maybe figure out they're so huge, right? And they're doing so many things and they're just so massive. They can figure out those small ways to connect, like the project that they can work on. Like, social media doesn't have to be there everything. It can be like, okay, we're just going to use this one project that we push to kind of get us out there. Honestly, with Sanctuary Nature Foundation, this Finding Wild Mumbai thing did really well, right? Like they got a lot of eyeballs from it, and it was quite a targeted project, right? And it need not have even been with me, right? Like they could have even done just looking at what wild spaces still exist in Mumbai using their field guide on their own. And as a small kind of concrete project, not concrete, let's say small niche project, I think it does better than a big sprawling thing. I rambled a lot, but I think the point
No,
is,
no, there's so much to resonate from that. I also want to just give another shout out to the Dole Project. I was in Wayanad, which is one of the places they had worked, I believe. Yeah, they had worked there. And I was in this local tea shop. Like, you wouldn't think much of it. It's just a small tea shop. And over there, I saw their poster. And I filmed something on that. I'll post that at some point. But they were putting up local posters in Malayalam, in the regional language, so that locals could connect with this animal. I think there are only, I mean, there might be less than 100 doles in Wayanad Wildlife Sanctuary. And so this brings that animal that people deem as vermin and so on really like to the forefront and shows them that, this is an animal dwindling greatly.
you made a great point, which I really want to make sure it gets underlined. Like the same thing that they're so good at doing on ground, organizations can also attempt to replicate on social, right? So as an example, I don't know, like I've find like, again, it's very hard to track engagement and like causation, correlation. Like you can get lost in like what is actually going on. But I found this thing where for a while I was like, okay, my Hindi content is doing better than English. Then I was like, I didn't know the Hindi content is actually not doing as well as the English. Like what is going on? There's probably no correlation there, right? But okay, it might take a while for like Malayalam content to catch on in terms of numbers versus English if you're already starting with an English follower base, right? But in India now, all the languages are relevant on social media, right? And it's also like you don't necessarily have to reach 1 million people. If you reach the right 1,000 people, that makes a huge difference, right? So I think that regional languages is a big one. And I know that that's something that we're all thinking about. I mean, I kind of do this thing where I go back and forth English, Hindi, Marathi, which I think is like a very naturalistic way to do it. So and then I also figure out per reel, like, okay, what makes sense. And mine are also very like on the fly. So I'm just like in the moment, I'm like, okay, this feels like this should be in this language. But organizations have data to support that, right? Like they know exactly where they can target what people with what ideas. So that's the thing maybe that they can focus on also, because I don't see a lot of regional language stuff from the really big organizations. Like the small organizations, obviously, the really big organizations, I think it's tough though, because like having worked in companies on this kind of stuff, like you're so worried about being the one person who takes social risks. And then like people who don't understand social, who are higher up than you, come and you're like, why are the views down, right? Or like, why is the engagement down? And then it's your neck and livelihood on the line. So maybe the best point to say after all this ramble is that people in organizations who are managing people who are doing the social need to allow for more risks, because one thing that maybe you, everybody else doing it individually has benefited from so much is so much space to take risk, right? Like we've done content which like that Ocean Month thing was like bizarre, right? Like you're going to rap every day about corals, but like it worked. And that is what like turbocharged the channel from kind of plodding along to like going very well. That's a risk that in an organization, it's going to be much harder to take, right? For an individual employee. So if the organizations can give more grace maybe to their employees to like do risky things.
Yeah, there are two points that I wanted to just emphasize on. The first being regional languages. I think there's even if we remove wildlife as a context, just whatever content you want to make, I think there's a huge scope, because you're going to get a very dedicated audience simply because there aren't that many creators doing it, right? I can totally picture someone sitting in interior Andhra Pradesh who only speaks Telugu and wants like Telugu content, but there's no one that's making it in whatever niche that they are interested in. And so the one person that does that will have sort of first mover advantage. No, I do. And to all the folks in these organizations listening, like do collaborate with individual creators. I think, both of our DMs are open. I can tell you that.
Started with that and ended with the risk thing, so that hopefully
yeah. Oh yeah, that's true. Even like I can see a parallel in what I did. So my family grows cardamom in Kerala, and that's also one of the reasons I get access to these landscapes, because in especially in that part of Munnar, the plantation and the rainforest is really meshed in, right? You could just be walking and you'd end up in one patch of rainforest. And so I thought, so since I spent a lot of time in the plantation, I thought maybe I'll make something on cardamom. A lot of people don't know how this crop, elaichi, for those who don't know, how this is grown. And so I just showed them, like, I made one thing showing that this is a cardamom plant. And I thought, this is a filler reel. Okay, I'm just doing it to keep the cadence. But that did really well. People were like, whoa, I didn't know this is how elaichi grows. I love elaichi heart, and I was like, oh, okay. Surprising. No, I love that. I love that. But one of the reasons that I also wanted to have you on is the fact that your reels, while informative, are very unique. Like, they have personality in it. Like, I can, even before we got on this call, like, I knew your personality already from the reels. And so I'm sure that features in somewhere in your creative process. Like, what are those levers that you're trying to pull when you make these reels? Like, you have those, I mean, I'm not that good with Hindi, but you have this way of using that language and using the right words to make it rhyme or to make it turn. I know this ties in with your rapping, and so that's why I wanted to get your input on this.
Firstly, this thing about the like Dole project poster is now playing in my head a lot, because I think a lot of this comes from, again, like, if it works on the ground, it'll probably work on social. This is my like 1 year ka knowledge. I guess, like, I don't know whether it holds up with data, but at least I feel that really holds true. And ultimately, this is what I keep telling people about social media, right? Like, none of us okay, pause, small aside. Because people ask this stuff like, oh, should I put like money? This is the thing I keep saying, right? Because there's people who are with no resources, right? Who are like, this is the first thing, obviously, with it. No, it's not. Because, like, I just don't think that trying to game this system is going to work for small individual people when this is meta. Like, it's one of the biggest conglomerates in the world. They are obviously going to be smarter than everyone trying to game it over here, right? And I think that understanding their objective is good, evil, amoral, whatever it is, glue people's eyes to screen, right? So if a thing keeps people watching, keep feeding that to people, right? That is exactly how attention works in the real world as well. Like, it's just been changed in medium, right? Like, if I'm talking to my friend about wildlife, as an example, if it's fun and if it's engaging in his personality and all, they'll probably listen longer, right? Or if I think of an angle that keeps them listening. So I think that's it, right? Like, just what worked in real life. Like, I didn't change it at all. In the beginning, if you go really to my oldest reels, I tried to have a slightly more serious cadence and maybe only say the facts as they would. But then I said, what's the point of me doing this? So the rap thing helps a lot, because I'm like, I mean, I've been yelled at for this. Like, I'm addicted to alliteration. I love rhymes.
Yeah.
I like go for all this stuff. There's like a writing thing where people are like, don't be addicted to alliterations, because, the way it sounds does not matter as much as the content of what you're saying. But my thing is, like, being addicted to alliterations, you start to make connections that other people wouldn't make, because your brain is connecting words, right? And then suddenly you have like pani prani pagal pan, which Samundari, Salaam, and all, which otherwise would
Yeah.
not happen. So I think that just, yeah, and like, I mean, I like listening to the music. I love all hip hop coming out of India, regional, Hindi, English. I'm starting to get into English hip hop from India, but like English hip hop from the world, from all over the world. And it's just all about being like lyrical, verbally playful, like taking risks verbally, all that. So I said, chalo, we do the same thing in the reels, and it landed. Sometimes I think maybe it doesn't land, but like, if out of 10 random things I say in a reel, 2 land and got people to listen through to the whole message, that's a win, right? So that's
Yeah. No. Oh my God.
this personality thing. Can I just say, because I do think that like the 4 or 5 creators that come to my mind when I think of like wildlife on Instagram, all have very distinct personalities and styles, right? Like, I don't know, so yours, recently I was just watching it and I was like, okay, this guy's like you may not like this comparison, okay? So just,
Go ahead. That's okay.
he's like a soulful Bear Grylls, right? Like, you're like exploring these areas and like explaining like the whole landscape, right? Not not individual species, but not that like, array, we're going to come and like, we're going to take over this landscape. Like, it's more like, chal, I'm going to become part of this and like explore it step by step, right? And then others some are more jokey, some are more serious. So I think that diversity of personality, again, like, goes back to that individuals and risks point, which is that it makes it so that there's different entry points, different nazariyas to the same wildlife, which is nice.
So much good stuff. Sadly, I mean, okay, so we are reaching the end, and I had two questions that I wanted to ask you. One was about your rapping. Like, if I mean, I do want to know that story though about how you got into rapping and how, and if you have like a wildlife rap to share with us, please go ahead.
There's so many, but I mean, we don't have a beat, but we can try and do just like a cappella freestyle or something if you want. But the how it happened is just, I think that it's a thing I liked doing. In that middle period where I was not so engaged with wildlife, I was still very engaged with hip hop. They almost were like at different times in my life. And then in the hip hop thing again, like college and being interested in, policy and journalism and like rights for people and stuff like that, you hear a lot of hip hop, which is very charged with message, right? And story and where people come from. And then I didn't do it for a while. And then a friend of mine who does completely unrelated music asked me to just make a little rap bar for some song he was doing. And he sent me the words, and I was like, nahi chalta hai. Like, you can't send me the words. I'll make my own. Did it. It was English, Hindi, mix, this, that, overuse of Sanskrit, Persian, God knows what, like vocabulary is going in, but like just to rhyme. And then I was like, yeah, I like doing this. Wrote this tiger song that Kids for Tigers liked it. The kids loved it. They go crazy because it incorporates the slogan and all. That song, Nara to Ghana process has happened, but now Ghana to recorded Ghana process is pending. So that will happen. But yeah, so it just became a thing where now I've just done this work in the UAE, which was back to back freestyle sessions for kids, right? From age 3 to 19. And each grade, the teachers were saying, this class is studying pollution, this class is studying deforestation. Chalo. Firstly, amazing what they study. They're really lucky to be studying all this stuff and to have rappers coming in to do this for them. But yeah, it's just a lot of like it has a different effect and it works on all ages, which is crazy to see. So I think that's the story of that. It just became a good medium to do it, just like Instagram is a good medium, or writing, or whatever else is a good medium.
Wow, wow. I love that. Okay, and this is the question I have set as the tradition, the ending tradition of this podcast. And so you can take this however you'd want, okay? If you had access to billboards across the world for like a day, what is one message that you would put up there? It could be a quote, it could be a line, it could be anything. It could even be your Instagram handle, maybe like as a subtitle.
That would be great because then they can just go and see everything in one. But I'm not.
Yeah.
I like. That's a tough question, man. Normally words come easy, not coming easy.
Yeah.
Give me a line, then I'll rhyme with it.
Samundar ke paas. I mean, this is Hindi, okay, but
Any line.
Samundar ke paas jao, and then I'll let you add the second line.
This is because the Jao becomes too easy. But
It's not. It's like it's easy for you, and that like
that's
that
not
didn't even.
how. Let's some.
All right, that's great, and we okay, cool. Sahir, thank you for joining the podcast.
Thank you for what you're doing, man.